with this guy. Okay, so this is Romania. Obviously, this is Ukraine, right? This is the Black Sea. So the town that we are dealing with mainly is this town called Constanța, and you can see it's east of Bucharest. If you look around, like starting here, like these are like NATO countries, including Romania, and then Ukraine is not. So you can see like that's a tense sort of thing. Moldova here is an important, what is it, maybe a barrier, is the way to think of it. So Ukraine comes down here. This is Ukraine also here. And so this is where Ukraine and Romania meet down here. They also meet over here, but Moldova's in the way, and there are Russian troops that have been here for years on the eastern edge of Moldova, an area called Transnistria. So there are Russian troops here. So anyone coming from Ukraine has to cut under that and come down here to get to Romania, or go all the way up over here, up into Poland or something like that. So map-wise, that's important to know as far as when people are coming to Romania. So this is my friend Justin and his wife Nana. Justin and I have known each other about 30 years. And in the early on days of our band, he was the manager of our band for about 10 years. And then he went to seminary, became a pastor in New York. So out on Long Island, he was a pastor out there. The church that he is at is sort of a reboot. It's a church that closed, and he reopened it. And while I was in seminary, I helped him with that, I wrote some songs that they used for the liturgy and stuff. And then before I came to St. Timothy's, I was there on staff at this church for about 6 months. I was going back and forth to Long Island a couple times a month. And then our bishop and their bishop couldn't see eye to eye, so that ended. But I still am on staff. I run their social media, Facebook, Instagram. I set up their website and designed it and stuff. And so we're still connected. Justin and I are still friends. And Michael, my bandmate, and Justin and I went over there together this past trip. But we'll get to that in a minute. So Justin, at some point, from his church, they were doing a trip in Europe, and their tour guide was sick, and they got a substitute tour guide, and her name is Nana. And she came on the bus, and Justin fell in love. And so she's from Romania. She speaks 5 languages, and she's a tour guide all over Europe. So she knows how to book a bus in a hotel, which will come in important later. So when all of this started happening, Nana, better go. No, let's go to here. So Nana is from that town right there, Constanța. That's where she grew up. And all of this is going on. People are crossing the border into Romania, and they realized, Justin and Nana realized that not only were they able to do something, but they actually felt an obligation to do something because of their unique set of talents and gifts and skills and background and all of that. So they went over in early March for what I call the triage time. This is right after the war started. Remember, it was at the end of February. And in early March, people were just flooding across the border. I have another map later. In this picture, so this is Romania. This is where people are ending up. This right here is the Danube River, and that shore on the other side, that's Ukraine. So I was going to say it's a golf shot, but not for me. But it's not that far, right? So there's a barge, like a ferry, that crosses every 2 hours. And every time it came across, every 2 hours, there were between 500 and 700 people on that ferry. And they would just step off the boat, and now they're in Romania. So what Justin and Nana did was you see the people in orange vests, they put on vests and started handing out sandwiches and tea and toys for kids and blankets and stuff. And people just kept coming. There they are, exhausted. And I just love this photo. It's Justin and a woman from Ukraine and her little kid. And Justin had to convince her that the sandwich was okay. And after that encounter, he said, he realized their desperation, that you get off a boat, someone hands you a sandwich, and you hand it right to your kid without checking it, or I don't know, just, the level of desperation and hunger and just wanting to know someone cared was sort of overpowering. So they were doing that for like 12 hours a day after day, and the people just kept coming. And the thing is, the people who came at first usually had a plan. They would say, like, I have a brother in Germany, I have a sister in Spain, whatever. So all they needed was a bus to get them like to Bucharest, and they could figure it out after that. So early on, it was just a matter of moving people away from the border. So Nana just kept chartering buses, and we were spending about $1,500 a day just on buses to keep moving people away. That has slowed considerably, as you saw in that news segment, and now it's about $800 a week on buses, but at the beginning, it was just keep moving people away from the border. So that's what they did, and then they came back, and then, there's the other map I was looking for, okay. So, a thing to see here, so this is Constanza down here now, and this is that section of Ukraine that touches Romania. So this is the border crossing right here around Toplia. So what they were doing was here at the border, either sending people to Bucharest or thinking they could send them down to Constanza where Nana grew up. The thing to remember overall here is, so this is Odessa, which you maybe have heard in the news once in a while. If someone's leaving Odessa and heading west, as I said, they can't go through this section of Moldova because it's filled with Russian soldiers. So they got to go this way, or go way up here, over here. So anytime something gets bad in Odessa, people come over here to Romania. This is Mykolaiv, also a very serious problem, a lot of issues there. And this is Mariupol, which you've heard a lot about on the news lately. As you can see, anything in southern Ukraine, it kind of leads you right here to Romania. Right now, things are not so bad in Odessa. We'll see what happens on May 9th. I mean, that's a big day in Russia. There's some scary predictions. But if things go bad in Odessa again, we're going to be back to triage time. But we're not there right now. So, the Life for Ukraine. So the church that I talked about earlier is called The Life on Long Island. It's not called The Life on Long Island, it's called The Life. And when we first started talking about trying to set up this center, we needed a name for the whole thing, and I realized that Life for Ukraine makes the most absolute sense. So that's what we started calling the whole thing. There's a website, or a page on their website, Life for Ukraine. And so Justin and Dana found this office building. Up there where the turrets are, there's a bedroom in the front of the building and a bedroom in the back. And the rest of it was just office space. So they were able to rent this for $1,400 a month, which is really cheap to us. So they rented it and then started renovating it. So this is what was an office room, which now, after my visit, I took this photo. We have 12 beds in there and 4 dressers, and we can sleep, including some of the toddlers who are in there. We have about 15 people in this room, comfortably. I mean, that sounds intimidating, but it's actually a lot better than how things work. This was a storage room in the basement. My favorite part is these tires here. And over like here, like if you came here and you turned in here, there was a sink and a hot plate and a microwave. And a building full of people. So this, as you'll see in the next photo, became this kitchen. So we put in this stove. There are 2 refrigerators over here you can't see. All of these cupboards, that shelf, and all that stuff. And now they're cooking like actual meals. And they have a schedule, like, you know, a couple of people cook each day. And so you want to be there when certain people cook and not when others cook. I'm kidding. All the food was amazing. And it's because, like, well, we'll get back to this, but these are just middle-class people. These are people like us. No, I'll tell you now. Yeah, I've always had in my mind that refugees are like poor people, you know, or people who just, what they really need is someone to pay their way. But these are people who, the woman who is what we call the house mother at the center here, she's a real estate lawyer, and her husband is a district attorney. He had to stay in Ukraine because he couldn't leave, but she's here at the house. Right? These are normal people like us. And it's only like my own silliness that made me think, oh, refugees are always poor people. They're not. They're just in a lot of trouble. And what they have skills, and they have cars, and they have everything. It's just their house is being bombed. You know, I mean, it's a different refugee situation than I've ever seen for that reason. Well, let me back up to that. So, people before I left kept giving me money, and I didn't ask for any money after my plane ticket was covered, but people kept giving me money and saying, do what needs to be done. So those dressers that I showed in the previous picture, well, here they are, fresh from IKEA. So those bunk beds and those dressers and the dishes that they're all eating off of now, that all came from money that people gave to me. And we bought all of that. And then we bought a week's worth of food my first week there. That's, I don't know why, but they measure food in pounds, no, kilos. So this is 500 kilos of food. I mean, you and I don't think of food that way usually, but that's how they think. So the one guy at the center orders the food, and then we pay for it, and it's about $1,200 worth of food there, and that lasts about a week, and then we gotta do it again. So the food coming in, this is before all the cabinets were built, that's why it's all on the floor, and that's why we needed the cabinets. We also, they had one washing machine for 45 people, and they had no dryers, and so they would wash clothes, and then they'd have to hang them up, you know, all over the place, which it's, you know, it's undignified in a lot of ways, but it's also, you know, pain in the butt, right? So another thing that we did is we bought 2 dryers and an additional washer, and so people can be doing laundry and not have to hang their clothes all over the building. The one place we went to, this is the only photo I'll be in, is, this woman right here is from Odessa, and she early on came over. Her husband is still back in Odessa, and she opened up a warehouse in Constanza, and she is really good at dealing with NGOs, and so she's getting all of this stuff destined for Odessa into this warehouse, and then they put it on trucks, and then they ship it back into Ukraine. After we were there for a while, about half of the people in this photo are people from our center. So people in our own center went and volunteered here, packing trucks to send things back to Ukraine. One other, I want to back up for a second. One other thing, this is Ina that I was talking about there. So she was from Odessa, went to Ukraine to flee, and then someone from Mariupol went to Odessa to stay in her apartment. So it's like everybody's, you know, shifting westward. And if there's an attack on Odessa, then that family's going to end up in Romania, probably. Right, so those are volunteers. And then here, this is in Odessa. All of those supplies in front of you were underneath the bus. And they took the supplies in, and then they put people on the bus and brought them back to Ukraine. So there is this back and forth, constant transportation going on. This is Joe. Joe and I spent a lot of time building dressers. I shouldn't say building, I should say assembling. Right? IKEA did all of that. We just put them together. But we did 12 dressers over the course of 4 or 5 days. And I really got to know Joe. He's a former Episcopalian. And is now a Lutheran. And I told him that I'm a former Lutheran and now an Episcopalian. So we just kind of crossed each other on the way. And then one of the people from the life that I've been talking about, they brought a group of about 8 people. Maybe when I had been there 3 days, they brought all those people over. One of whom is Roxanne here. She's a retired nurse. And so one thing she did is went through the whole center and did all vital signs on all of the kids to make sure everybody's okay. What I really love about this picture is the sisters giving the side eye. What is that oximeter thing? And then Roxanne also led a CPR class for kids and adults, and then first aid for adults. The idea is, as much as possible, is to get this center able to function on its own, and things like first aid are important. We had the ambulance on speed dial during the time I was there because people kept getting sick, especially kids. And the flu, or something like the flu, ran through the place. We tested everybody, it was not COVID. But the ambulance kept coming because kids were really sick. That calmed down a lot, and now things are pretty calm and stable. Another one of the people who came over from the life is Lena. She's a chef, and she does like these 3-month classes in Italy, because she grew up there. And so she wanted to do a baking class with the kids, and they did that. Kids baked some things, it was really great. And then I have a couple of stories here. This car, you'll see the steering wheel is on the wrong side. That's because it's from England. So there's a guy that Justin has been in touch with. We call him Steve the Brit. And this guy just goes back and forth. He lives in Odessa, and he drives people from Odessa to Constanza, and then he fills up his car with stuff, and he takes it back to Odessa. And he just goes back and forth, back and forth. So Lena, in that previous picture, her friend in California has a neighbor whose mother is in Odessa. When the bombing they started bombing that Saturday, a couple of neighborhoods. She lived really close. This guy was concerned. He called Lena. Lena put him in touch with Justin. So Justin, of course, hits up our go-to guy, Steve the Brit. And he texts him at night and says, I have this like 84-year-old woman. She has a broken shoulder. She wants to leave and come to Constanza. Or she wants to go to California, where her son is. But right now she's in Odessa. And Steve says, well, I'm coming to Constanza in the morning. He says, I could be at her house, but I'd have to be there at 6:30. So then Michael contacts the son and says, okay, you don't know me, but here's what's going to happen. So they were able to work it all out. And Steve picked her up. She does not speak one word of English, not one word. He does not speak one word of Ukrainian. And the two of them spent like 8 hours in the car, including the ferry crossing. And then Steve brought her. That's Steve. Steve the Brit. That's the woman we call Grandma. And that's Lena, the chef lady. So that's in Constanza. And then once we got her there, she really wanted pasta. So it was the one word that she and Steve knew together, was pasta. And so we took her right away and got pasta. And then I downloaded Google Translate on my phone, which was really helpful. And then I was able to say some things and back and forth. It was great. So then we took her, so we have our shelter, the Life for Ukraine, but then there's another shelter in Constanza that we have partnered with to cover overhead and some other things. And we took her to that shelter. And here she is arriving. This is, that's Justin, again, Pastor Justin. That's Lena, the chef. That's Grandma. And then this young man here knew like 3 languages. So he was like perfect. He could go from Romanian to English to Ukrainian. I don't even know his name, but he was like the godsend translator. And so Grandma got there. They put a real sling on her arm instead of that bathrobe thing she had. And in the morning, or 2 days later, it was Tuesday morning, they took her to Bucharest. They put her on an airplane, and she arrived in California. Nobody planned any of that, of course, but it happens through the connections and the relationships, which keeps coming up over and over. So this is Anya. She is the house mother at the center. She's the one I told you is a real estate lawyer. And what she's looking at here are letters that were written by the Lutheran High School out of Long Island. And she started crying, understandably. But then she shared those with the kids, and it was really great. And then they wrote some letters that they'll send back to Long Island. And this is the house mother at the other one, the partner center. Her name is Deanna. And she runs a tight ship, that lady, I'll tell you. I would not want to stay in that center. Okay, and then here's another story of hope. So, we have Easter here, and Orthodox Easter is typically week before, week after, however well that works. It was a week after. So I left here on Easter Monday, which meant I was there for all of Holy Week. And we had a plan that on Easter Sunday, Easter to people in the Orthodox faith is like Christmas and Thanksgiving combined to us. I mean, it's the biggest deal. So for these people to be essentially exiled at the highest holiday of their entire year was really, really depressing, right? So we had this idea to get the two centers. Houses sounds like I'm talking British royalty. This is the people from the two centers, to get them together at the partner center, because they have a big parking lot where we can set up tables and stuff. And so they're really big on Easter eggs over there, as Mackenzie knows. But when we got there and we looked at the eggs, and you can see a lot of them are dyed the colors of the Ukrainian flag, which was quite a moving thing to see. And so the kids dyed all these eggs. We built some more furniture, so there was like a swing for them to like hang out on. And then we had the big, massive feast, straight out of medieval times. And some of the food seemed like it was from medieval times. There was a thing that I thought was a stack of pancakes. It was made out of liver. Yeah, you see what I'm talking about. But like little touches like that, like they did, the plasticware is the colors of the Ukrainian flag. And it was just great to sit down with people and not have any idea what they're talking about. But we could make connections. And it was just great to have this feast. And all of that food was cooked by people in the centers, which is really amazing. Okay, here's another great story. So these people, this family, have been staying, that's the Life for Ukraine Center, the building that I showed you earlier on. Someone in the congregation on Long Island had this name. It's like a sunflower with a logo in the middle. Since that sign has been up, two different families have walked by and said they're from Ukraine and they're looking for help and housing and all of that. And Justin was able to send them on and get them the help that they needed. But so now it's become a visible thing that people can see and know they can go there and be safe and get help as they need it. So this family has been staying at the center for over a month. And back in the 90s, when Michael and I used to do the occasional tour in Germany, musical tour, we met a guy over there who was a Lutheran pastor but also a travel agent. And he would always set up our tours. So Michael and I would just get off the plane and there'd be a van with sound equipment and an itinerary, and we'd go and play concerts. Since then, when we've done this thing called the Luther 500 Festival, that same guy, Christian Udpalo, the pastor, would do all the arrangements for that sort of stuff. And now he's sort of retired from his travel agent job, and he's at a church in the town where he lived. It's a town called Homburg. It's near Frankfurt. So all that back, Christian Udpalo and his congregation have sponsored one of the families from Ukraine. They set them up in an apartment, and they're ready to go. This family, in the picture, decided that they also wanted to go to Germany. And Justin called Christian, and Christian said, we would love to help them out. So they rented an apartment, they bought all the furniture, they remodeled as necessary for a kitchen and stuff, and we put these people this family, on a train. Right now, for people from Ukraine, all the trains in Europe are free. Not for anyone else, so don't get any ideas. But we put them on a train in Bucharest, and then they had a 30-hour train journey, which didn't cost anyone anything, or any of us anything. And while they were traveling there, Christian and the others in his congregation, they started setting up this apartment that they found, putting up curtains and stuff. And then the family arrives in Kassel, which is the town closest to Homburg. And the people from Christian's parish met them at the train station and took them to their new apartment, and they're beginning their new life. There's the family arriving on the train. And the day that they left, I think it's the youngest girl. I think it's her. She drew a thing and put it on the wall in the Life for Ukraine Center. She put it on the wall in the dining room, and it's that. Which is really quite amazing. And there. That is the end of my presentation. So that's what I planned to say, and now I've said it. So, does anyone have any questions? Mackenzie? How long have we known each other, Mackenzie? You didn't know I played in the band? No. Okay, well I did. Yeah, we haven't played in a long time. We were playing a concert in June, but that's another story. Yeah. Yes, Jay.
How did they handle, like, and I know it was an odd time, but like passport, visa, you know, like they just moved to Germany. Well, here's Ukrainian vendors moving to Germany.
Yeah, everything is hyper deregulated right now. Yeah, but that's a very good question, right? But a lot of it is they work that stuff out in a sort of backfilled way, right? So they're like, the first thing is to get you out of Ukraine, and then we'll figure out these other things. And that's sort of like, from my perspective, that's a phone number on the wall. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know anything about any of that. It's like, but here's the number to call, or here's the office that will take you to, which is another thing. There's a lot of that, like, you know, people come over and they still have, you know, medical problems and dental issues and whatever. So a lot of stuff is just moving people around town, getting the things they need. One Ukrainian girl, I thought she was saying she wanted to buy a new cell phone. What she wanted was a SIM card, right? And it's like, Google Translate came to the rescue. We would have spent hundreds of dollars for, she'd be like, I don't want this, I want a SIM card. Yeah.
Do they have access to their finances, or?
Access to their finances, as far as I know, yes. So a lot of that, yeah, it's like, it's not that they're poor, right? I mean, they do have money. They don't know how to navigate being in this new country or what's going to happen tomorrow, kind of thing. One of the concerns over and over is that a lot of them feel like we're just waiting and then we'll go back home. And so we have to keep telling them, first of all, we don't know how long this is going to go. And this could be years, right? And then second of all, there may not be anything to go home to. So you have to think in terms of, what do I do now? One thing that's really complicating things is, of course, that the men can't leave Ukraine, right? So I think you have to have, if you have 4 children, I think you can come, you can leave. But I think if you have 3 or fewer, you have to stay and fight.
So are the men working, or are they automatically put into the army?
Well, they just can't leave. So they're not necessarily in the army. So like that district attorney, he's still going to work.
Okay.
Right, I mean, which is really weird. But there are pockets of Ukraine where life is normal, right? And then there are other pockets where the shells are falling every minute. Oh, Mackenzie, you have a follow-up.
I have 2 questions, but I forgot what's in the top. I remember, did you eat the lemon thingy?
Yes, what?
Liver pancakes.
Oh, I didn't even try. No, and there were other dishes that had caviar in them, but I had tried caviar for the first time the night before, and I think I'm done with that. If I want salted Jell-O tapioca, yes, the borscht was delicious. Yeah, that's the kind of thing, right? I mean, they're Ukrainians, they make borscht all the time, and they're like, now we have a kitchen, we'll make you the thing that we make. And it was really delicious, yeah. Someone, oh, yeah, John.
How risky is it driving back and forth from Romania to Odessa?
It's become riskier. Let me go back to my famous map. There. So here's Odessa, right? That keeps coming up. Steve the Brit lives in Odessa. Doesn't speak Ukrainian. I don't know how he does that. But so you can see, like, there's a little connection here, but it's not really a strong one. There's this bridge right here that takes you across whatever body of water it is. I think it's just an inlet. But and the Russians keep bombing that. And so, like, they repair it so people can go back and forth for a while, and then they bomb it again. And so that's like over and over and over. But if that bridge is out, anyone who wants to get to Romania has got to go all the way through, because there's all Russian troops along here. So it's dangerous. The interesting thing about Steve the Brit is that he's a Buddhist. And so we keep saying, like, aren't you afraid? And he says, those missiles don't have my name on them. We're like, okay, Steve. All right, mate. Good luck to you. But he just has an attitude of, like, if it's his time to die, he's going to die. And he knows people need help. And so he just keeps doing this back and forth. And and he won't, if you try to praise him at all, he freaks out. Because he says the universe has put him there and enabled him to do this work, and that's what he's doing. And I'm like, okay. You call it the universe, I call it something else. Yeah, but it's safe. safe unless they start bombing. That's the weird thing, right? Because that Holy Saturday, they just randomly suddenly bombed Odessa, right? And so I thought, we're going to be flooded with new refugees. I have to stay for a while and do what I can. It turned out we had like 5 people. Like it wasn't the flood we thought because they stopped bombing, you know. And then it's like May 9th, they may pick it all up and start bombing again. We just don't know. I don't think they know. It's just, yeah. Yes, Mackenzie.
Why do you have sunflower background in Holden?
Why what?
Why do you have sunflower background?
Oh, good question. So, have you ever seen the Romanian flag?
Never.
Okay. It's yellow at the bottom and it's blue at top.
I've seen the Ukrainian flag, not the Romanian flag. Did you see Romanian?
Did I just say Romanian?
Yes.
Thank you. No, the Romanian flag is red, white, and blue, as I learned. No. So, yeah, primary colors, that's what I meant. So the Ukrainian flag is yellow on the bottom and blue on the top. Okay? Do you know what the national flower of Ukraine is?
Is it sunflower?
Yes.
Oh,
And do you know why the flag looks like that?
because it's sky and sunflower.
Because it looks like that, right? So it's the yellow on the bottom represents sunflowers and then the blue sky above it. That's why the flag looks that way. Great, right? Yes, Lynn.
What are your expectations for moving forward? What is needed, what do you expect?
Yeah, so moving forward, but part of the reason that Michael and I went over, my bandmate, I used to play in a band, part of the reason we went was to be a set of fresh eyes, right? Because Justin was so enmeshed in it, just doing triage. And it's like the two of us could come over and say, what do these people need tomorrow and next week and next month? And so it's pretty clear, like, the 3 big needs. One is counseling for the kids. I mean, for everybody, but especially for the kids, because they have no way to process all of this, right? So counselors for the kids is very important. And I think a social worker for the adults to help them figure out what resources are available and what are the best next steps in moving forward. And then the third thing is the school. So we have looked at a storefront, and we think we're going to be able to repurpose that. And again, because the people coming over are just regular people, in our center there are teachers, there are nurses, there's a medic, like they're just regular people. So I don't think we'd have to hire teachers, we just need to get the space. Right now, although education is free in Romania for everybody, the Ukrainian kids on the whole don't feel comfortable just being dropped in a Romanian school where they don't know the language, and I get that. But a lot of them are doing school online still, back from where they came from. So in the mornings, a lot of days, down in the dining room, there'd be 3 or 4 kids on computers going to school. So one of our goals is to make things normal as possible, but also as uncomfortable enough that they want to think about the future. And we don't want them to think about, I'm going back to Ukraine, because we don't know. So we want them to think about, if I leave Constanza, where do I go? How can I get there? Like, you know, all that stuff. So those are the things we're trying to work out, more longer term, because I still don't know. Like long term, 3 years from now, this could all be like, phew, that was close. Or it could be still going on. You know, we don't know. So a lot of it is just trying to get them to reframe how they think about where they are and what they're going to do next. And we're still unsure about how we can help them. Yes, Heather.
So I guess my question to you is this Life for Ukraine. The people coming into your center, are you just kind of like a stopping point, trying to find them a new place to go? Because you obviously just can't keep the same people there constantly.
Right. Yeah, but we like to think of ourselves as a stopping point, but it's definitely more than like a hotel stopping point.
Right.
You know?
I
Yeah,
get
it's
that.
more like that family that went to Germany. That's our dream, right? That someone stays there for a month, gets their life together, gets the kids all set and stuff, and then they're ready to go. We can put them on a train, they have somewhere they're going, and they're going to have a new life. That's the dream. And so now those 5 people left, we can house 5 more people coming behind them. the faster we can turn them over, the better. But for people who don't have anywhere to go, it's really tricky. And that's where something like a social worker, who unfortunately has to be at least bilingual, if not trilingual, the social worker could really help.
And over there, a lot of people are bilingual because the
Yes.
countries are so small, but
Right, the problem is their second language tends to be English.
Yes.
Right, so it's like Ukrainians speaking English to us and we're speaking English to the Romanians, and we're like trying to, you know,
I have two coworkers, mother and daughter from Ukraine.
and then from what I understand, most Ukrainians speak Russian, but Russians don't necessarily speak Ukrainian, which is interesting. And might be their downfall, I hope.
They cook at home all the time. I'm not surprised that they're getting good meals.
Yeah, the food is amazing.
What's the capacity for how many people?
Oh, in the center, right now we're probably up to about 50. We can house about 50. Yeah, and the other center, I think they're about 35. Theirs is all one level, and that's why we took Grandma there, so she wouldn't have to do the stairs.
So when you started, or when your friend was already there, when you started, what was the capacity, 0?
They had 2 bedrooms upstairs, and so, you know, however many people you could put in a bedroom, and that was it. And then they borrowed some bunk beds. It was in the news clip, there's some black bunk beds. Those were borrowed, and the ones we replaced them all with these higher quality ones from IKEA that also have like a rail along the side. There's the black ones, and it's like you put a kid on the top and they roll out of bed. It's like, that's the last thing we need. Yeah, so we're at about 50, they have about 35, and then there's another center that we're just sort of like, we've arranged with a hotel further south to like house some people for a while until the tourist season, which is beginning about now. So there's going to be a big, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of people who are suddenly homeless because hotels have been putting them up for free during this downtime. The one thing I think that the hotel owners and resort owners haven't taken into account is that there's a war 100 kilometers away. Like, you know, I don't think people are going to be lining up to go to Constanza and hang out at the Black Sea. You know, I might be wrong, but I don't think the tourist season is going to be what they think it is. So I think that housing will be available longer than they think. Yes.
So do you have plans to go back, or are you going to do some fundraising around here?
We have talked about going back around mid-June for a little while, but that would only be if we have a plan in place for how we can do the next thing. But there's no point just going there and being there, you know. So if like we could move forward on the school, that might be a thing that we go back in June to try to get set up and get that going. Yes, Lynn.
That's what I was going to ask. Now, this family that went to Germany were sponsored by a church there in Germany, is that what you said?
Yes.
Do you foresee down the road, maybe try to establish some churches here, or even us?
Yeah, it's the one thing we haven't figured out yet is how to deal with the United States in all of this.
Right.
We've had 2 families in our congregation who said they would be interested in hosting a family.
Right.
But so far, I've not been able to figure out how that's going to happen. I think you have to actually sponsor them and sign things that say you're responsible for them and all that sort of stuff. Countries in Europe are feeling that way right now, and again, I think it's because they know that the only thing standing between them and Russia is Ukraine, so they're very happy to help everybody and do everything they can. Yeah.
Has our diocese made any commitment to help with refugees? and-
Not yet, no, from the diocese, nothing yet. I was at that clergy conference Tuesday to Thursday, and Wednesday night at the priest in Worcester,
There's no point in my
when
getting
the
tickets.
bishop was about to say something, he raised his hand and said, I would like to have an opportunity for George to talk about his trip to Romania. And I was like, George never asked for this opportunity. So then I was on the hook. But so the next morning I talked a little bit, and
What's that?
other clergy are very interested in helping.
Oh, I like that.
And the bishop specifically thanked me for representing the diocese, you know, unofficially.
Grover does
and
too,
doing
as a
so.
matter of fact.
And it, you know, everybody wants to do something, and it's hard to find what you know is going to work, right? Like you could give money to the Red Cross, but you don't know where that's going. You know, I mean, I got to say, I didn't see any border or anywhere else. I saw Habitat for Humanity at the border, and the Jehovah's Witnesses, which is a whole different story. But I didn't see like the Red Cross or anybody. So I don't know. But the point is, I can promise you that any money you contribute will go directly to helping these people. And that's like the best I can do, you know. It's hard to know. It's hard to know how to ask, but I guess I'm kind of asking now. But if people do want to make a contribution, the best place is that very last slide. So it's the life and y/Ukraine there. Because that money goes right to the church. They're working on getting a 501c3 separate for everybody's benefit. But the money goes right to them and it goes right to Romania. If you give money to me, I have to put it through my account and then send it myself to that same address. So it could be problematic at tax time.
I think you put a link in one of your updates, didn't you?
Yeah, I get a little overzealous on links in my emails. I apologize. Mackenzie, yeah.
Let's record the lunch in 5 minutes.
Why would an office space have bedrooms?
Why what?
Why would an office building have bedrooms?
That's a good question. I think the idea is that you would like either live upstairs and work downstairs, or you could rent out the upstairs and still have your offices
Take care.
downstairs.
See you.
That's the best I could do. Yeah. It's a good question. Yes.
So Odessa and Romania are connected by the Black Sea. Why is it just too dangerous to transport people by sea, or is there just there's no boats for that? Like, that's a direct connection.
Let's go back to a handy.
Okay.
So, one of the things about where we were is, I'm probably in your way. But so here's Constanza, right? And this is Ukraine. When we were here, our hotel looked straight out. We walked out, we looked out the front door, and there's the Black Sea. Right? So we're looking east. So if you just continue going, you can come to Crimea here. But this is about 100 miles here, and over to Odessa is about another 100. So the whole time we're in Constanza, there are boats. It's a port city, right? So there are boats coming in, and they're just out there because they can't unload them fast enough. So we walk out of the hotel, you look out, and there's like 20, 30 ships just waiting to dock to be unloaded. Most of those supplies are going to Ukraine. And as Steve the Brit pointed out, probably half of those boats have weapons on them that have been shipped from other countries around the world, which Putin has said are legitimate targets, right? So, I mean, the weapon shipments, right? So, like, right out there, we're looking at them, it's like, those are apparently legitimate targets, right? At the same time, those ships are all sitting there, half of them loaded with explosives. Over here is the Russian Navy lobbing missiles up into Ukraine from here. So, like, 100 kilometers apart are warships and weapons just floating out there, right? Not to mention, the Ukrainians have mined some of their harbors and stuff like that. So it's a very dangerous time to be on that water. So I think that everybody knows that, and everybody's just heading the general direction of west. Once they leave home, they're just heading west. And that's, at this point, like, they have no real plan except, I don't want to be here when the missiles land on the buildings. What else? Yes?
I thought Moldova was a free country, or did Russia just overrun it?
There's the eastern, so Moldova. Moldova used to be part of Romania, I found, but then broke off into its own country. Back when all of that stuff was Donbass and all of that, or maybe it was the Crimea annexation. So Russian soldiers, it's the specific area called Transnistria right here. And that, for whatever reason, there's a lot of Russian soldiers. And I think it's related to Crimea more, but I don't know. And, which is reflects, so they're on the western side of Ukraine, sitting there, but Russia's way over to the east. So I don't know how and why that is.
Are they pro-Russian or like over?
No, Moldova itself is, would be pro-Ukraine. But they just have this like occupied space right here. That's Russian soldiers. And that all has to do with the design for taking Odessa and creating a shipping route up through, you know, it's like tactical stuff as well. Anything else? They don't want to keep you too long. Thank you for listening. And I'm always available to answer questions about any of this as best I can. And when I find out more information, I'll pass it along to you for sure. That's all I got. I got to say that the main thing is keep praying for peace and pray for safety for those traveling and those stuck where they are. And then as well for Russian citizens. You know, people who didn't ask for any of this. It's really hard to remember that they are beloved children of God as well. It's not how we generally think, but it is in fact true. And it's my job as the priest to remind us of that. So, thank you again. Thank you so much.